Alright everybody, we're stuck at a construction zone for about an hour, it looks like, so thought we'd give you a little bit of a tour of where we've been living for the last couple of weeks. Rosa the Wonder Moto Bike. We love Rosa. Alright, this is the front of Rosa. Let's start over here. This is where you start the bike, and this is what fried on the evening of day 4, and we had to get, it would just all fuse solid, and we had to get Gorky the Wonder Mechanic to rewire the bike in the middle of the night on a dark rainy night. Onto the instrument panel there. So this would be the tacho, and then this is the fuel gauge. That doesn't work. This is the speedometer. That doesn't work either. There's the odometer there. That doesn't work either. But since Gorky rewired it for us, the light comes on in the console now, so we can clearly see which instruments don't work, where before we just had to assume that they weren't working. Here's the bright lights that you can't feel when your hands are numb and frozen. And like all Peruvians, we tend to turn them on about 10 meters before we get to the car, so it blinds the driver, which is a nice thing. There's the keys for the electric start, which works sometimes and sometimes not. That's actually the second electric start we've had on young Rosa here. Down to our designer plastic baggie on the gas tank cover. And that's because if the gas tank doesn't actually seal properly, so if you fill it up with fuel, drive out of the petrol station, hit a bump, and then gas will spill out over the top, usually all over your legs. Here's a nice seat cover that we cannibalized from one of the other teams that put their bike on a truck. Thank you very much, Three Tired Travelers. This is a cracker of a... Other than that, underneath that seat cover is a painfully horrible seat that really just hurts a lot. Around to the front tire that at one point had some tread on it. Now, not so much. Dead bald. And probably should be replaced. We actually stopped in the last town to replace it, and the guy took it off and said, "All right, where's your extra tire?" And we said, "We don't have an extra tire." And he goes, "Well, I don't have one either." So tire dealers here in Peru don't actually sell tires. Here's all the lovely wiring that Gorky redid for us on day 4, and with all the jarring and everything, that's completely come loose now, and it's just hanging down. It's very embarrassing to have Rosa to have her bits hanging out all over the place. Here's the motor that leaks oil here on a regular basis, so you kind of have to basically put oil into her every single day. And we change the oil pretty much every other day since we started. Back up here to the side mirror. This is what fell off spontaneously on day 4 down the mountain. Again, we cannibalized that from another team who was putting theirs on a truck on the way home. Around to the passenger quarters, you may notice there's a big dent, a big ass mark there on the left-hand side. That's because the passenger has to sit there because the only wheel that has power is this left wheel here. So this devilish 2-chain mechanism that you can see underneath here. So there's a front chain that goes to some sort of weird quasi-mid-axle nonsense, and then back to the left-hand wheel. So the left-hand wheel is the only wheel that gets power out of the whole bike. Here's a screw that holds on the kind of the shock frame that kind of vibrated out about that far one day that we saw and almost came out on us. It vibrated and stuff out, but luckily we caught it in time. Here's a wheel. We've replaced that wheel as well. So our Mototaxi Hoon, Mad Max Mototaxi Hoon friends, they took us to the speed shop. When we get to the speed shop, that's the new wheel that we've had put on the Rosa. Over here is probably the most indestructible part of the bike, which is the blue tarp. That blue tarp's been on from the beginning. Underneath that is all our stuff that we daily take on and take off and put onto the bike, held on with good old-fashioned Australian bungee straps. You gotta love that. Extra fuel carried in this completely dangerous and flammable and non-approved container here, and we've used that twice, I think, on the trip so far. The yellow tarp canopy, which I'm sure you've seen in all the videos, that looks like it's really about to depart stage right. Well, I forgot to show you another feature over on this side of the subframe of the canopy holder, basically held together with a zip tie. So Rosa at this point comprised most of the, I'll say 60-70% of gaffer tape and zip ties is what Rosa's made up at this point. There's our chain lock that we drove away with on the wheel one day. Obviously we didn't get too far with that on the wheel. And here's a chain lock from obviously one of the previous teams who just forgot to take it off in the first place. And here is another ball tire that we probably should have replaced a while back, but we didn't. We're going to try and get the last couple 100 kilometers to the finish line on that. And then that brings us around to the other side. Inside is the living quarters, the posh living quarters inside the Mototaxi. There's where we hang our duffel bags there. That's Gerald's duffel bag, which makes a spectacular pillow if you happen to be sleeping in the back as well. And then over here is my duffel bag hanging there, stuffed with warm clothes, because God forbid I ever get cold again. And then down here underneath is our emergency equipment bag. It's got first aid kit, some spare oil, our tools, a rope, some carabiners to pull the old girl out of a ditch if we need to. Really didn't have to use much of that other than when we had to get towed back into Wanako to get fixed on one of the days. So that's the lovely Rosa, the mighty Mototaxi, and this is what we've been seeing for the last. This is how we've been seeing Peru for the last 13 days. Thanks, everybody.